So next up in our series of commander duels, we have Animar, Soul of Elements, versus Gwendlyn to Corci. Animar is a morph combo deck, using the general to make morph creatures really cheap or free, and then throw a bunch of them onto the table. And Gwendlyn is a discard Punisher deck, so stuff like Wheel of Fortune, and then punishing your opponent with Megrim or Underworld Dreams. So you'll notice that production values have slightly increased. I got some twine and dangled my camera from a chandelier, so now we have an overhead view. Pretty sweet. Yeah, this game's basically going to come down to who gets their key cards first. Animar just really needs to resolve the general and keep it on the table. Gwendlyn sort of needs to hit a few combo pieces. Can't really get far without some sort of Punisher effect, like Megrim or Underworld Dreams. And then some sort of Wheel of Fortune to back it up. So turn 3 Animar is pretty standard. Coalition Relic is one of my favorite mana rocks in the format, especially for these 3-color decks. These are pretty budget mana bases here, just because we have so many decks and only so many lands to put in all of them. I don't actually like classical music, it's just available free on the internet. Creative Commons, so I'm allowed to use it without getting my account cancelled. So yeah, I guess the main win con for Animar is general damage, because it's going to put a whole bunch of creatures out and make Animar huge, and then its protections makes it really hard to kill. Gwendlyn herself usually doesn't end up getting played that very much with this deck. She's really not that great, but you know, if the deck has nothing else to do, it doesn't mind casting her. So as expected, some morphs start to come out. Animar gets bigger every time. And 3 morphs means that all morphs are now free. Random snow-covered island. I don't know why that's there. And that's a Dragon Mage. So that's a recurable Wheel of Fortune effects. Turn 5 Dragon Mage is pretty cool, I guess. And Gwendlyn's going to activate her ability. Of course, Dragon Mage is better if it could be backed up with a Megrim type effect or something to make those Wheel of Fortunes count. Of course, the Animar deck benefits greatly from Wheel of Fortune effects, since it can throw down those morph creatures for free usually. Every time it can refill its hand, it can do a whole lot of damage. Tidespout Tyrant is one of the many ways that Animar can take advantage of throwing down a whole bunch of creatures in one turn. So that's a pretty big threat for the Gwendlyn deck right now. Animar is already up to 10 general damage. He's hard to block with protection from black. Could have traded with the Dragon Mage there, but I think Matthew wants to keep that out, because now he's got a Cataract Parasite. So he's finally got a way to start doing some discard punishment. Croesus' Charm to get rid of that Tidespout Tyrant before it becomes a problem. And then Ashes to Ashes. Really good removal spell for black. Pick a couple of those morphs at random. That one's not a big deal, but Fortune Thief here is a big pain in the ass. It's a good one to get out of the way. Notice that Animar is immune to all of this removal. That's a good Voltron general, one that just can't get killed easily. Gwendlyn does not have a ton of answers to that, since most of its removal is black. So the Dragon Mage gets in, and we wheel. 7 damage from Cataract Parasite, and Gwendlyn's gonna pull another land out of that hand. It's kind of a risk wheeling and then letting Animar get a turn to throw down a bunch of morphs, because Peter now has a full hand of creatures. But chances are Animar won't get big enough to kill Matthew this turn. However, that's probably going to seal the deal. Weird Harvest for 6. Weird Harvest is a good card for Animar just because this deck loves to fill its hand really quickly. Of course, all of those can come into play for free because of Animar, and that's going to pump him up pretty big. I think Animar is a 12/12 now. And protection from Cataract Parasite means he cannot be blocked. So that's the first game of the books. So that was a good example of the Wheel of Fortune working to Peter's advantage there, because he got to dig into the Weird Harvest. Both of these decks run a lot of hand refilling cards. There's a Bloodchief Ascension. It's sort of another Punisher card, although it takes a while to get anywhere. Zoetic Cavern. So Peter's not got his right colors there, but that's a timely Kadama's Reach, so he'll be able to cast Animar next turn. And there's the Animar. This is going to be worth a counter spell. Yeah, Matthew's going to cast Forbid. Just because Animar can get off the wall pretty quickly. It really just needs to stay out for a turn to become a big problem. Matthew misses his land drop, so just drops Gwendlyn. It's not good to be missing lands this early. This time Animar sticks. Grabs a good card at random there with Gwendlyn's ability. I'll stop showing you these non-basic lands. They mostly just tap for mana, so I don't really need to show you each and every one. But that was a good land top deck because now we can cast Gilded Lotus, which is going to solve his mana issues. However, Peter now gets to untap with Animar, so he could potentially do some damage this turn. I think he's running like 45 morph creatures in this deck, so it's not really surprising that he can just vomit out an entire hand of them in one turn. He can either win with an army of 2/2s or with general damage with a gigantic Animar. Sometimes he actually flips over the morph creatures and uses the creatures that are underneath them. So yeah, he was able to play 4 morph creatures this turn. Now Animar is a 5/5 pro-black. Always a pain in the ass. Increasing Ambition. This is probably my favorite card from Dark Ascension. Kind of an underrated card. It does cost a lot of mana to cast, but being able to flash it back and tutor twice is insane. So it looks like Matthew got Earthquake there to deal with that army of morphs, which were going to be kind of a problem. Animar is still a 5/5 creature with pro-black. Gwendlyn's going to grab a Cryptic Command with her random discard. And the Earthquake means we finally get to put a counter on Bloodchief Ascension. Of course, Peter just lost all those morphs, so he's down to just a couple cards in hand. Fortunately, he has Memory Jar. Like I said, he likes to run a whole bunch of ways to refill his hand so that he can keep throwing down morphs. So the Memory Jar is going to be big next turn. He maybe could have popped it immediately, and hopefully hit a bunch of free morph creatures, but he's going to wait until he has mana next turn. Now it's time to flash back that increasing ambition. Grab a couple cards. Ideally, Matthew would love to go for like a Megrim and maybe Underworld Dreams or something to sort of get the win cons on the table, but he's going to have to get a Pongify just to get rid of that gigantic Animar, which threatens to get even bigger next turn. So unfortunately he had to use those tutors just to get removal, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but means the game is going to go slower. And Gwendlyn just swung in for 3 that turn because Peter's down to no cards in hand. But that Bloodchief Ascension is now up to 2 counters. Peter pops the Memory Jar, and we'll see what he can do with it. Gets a Sensei's Divining Top. Oh, we got a Morph. And that's a Mind's Desire, so that's one of a few ways that he can abuse dropping a bunch of free creatures in one turn. Usually when you see Mind's Desire it's used to be broken, but he plays it pretty fairly in this deck. So this time he's only going to get to resolve it 3 times. Island and Tectonic Edge is not what he wants to see on a Memory or a Mind's Desire. And the third one is, yeah, a Tribal Force Mage. So he really got absolutely nothing off of that Mind's Desire. And didn't really do too well with that Memory Jar either. Still, it's not like Matthew has a commanding position. He still hasn't got that Bloodchief Ascension live. But he did get some sort of card with that increasing ambition last turn, so hopefully he has something good in hand. This Gwendlyn deck is definitely suited for multiplayer rather than one-on-one, because it runs all sorts of effects that affect multiple players. Niv Mizzet, another way to take advantage of drawing lots of cards, and Guess Grimoire. So Matthew's all set up to do a bunch of damage if he can get a Wheel of Fortune type effect or something. Guess Grimoire is probably the most ridiculous card in this deck. If you resolve that at a table full of players, and then cast Wheel of Fortune or something. Yeah, let's draw 35 cards or something ridiculous like that. With no cards in hand, Peter's in top deck mode, and doing some main phase Sensei's Divining Top to trying to draw on something useful. He finds something useful on top, so he swaps the top for the top card. And Beast Within on Niv Mizzet. He knows that that thing's going to be a bit too strong if he lets it stay out. That's a Soul Ring. Not amazing on turn 12 or whatever, but it's still pretty good. Tapping lots of mana. Just a Comet Storm though, that's going to kill the Morph, the Ape token, and deal 7 damage to Peter's head. And then swing in with the Beast and Gwendlyn. Gwendlyn usually isn't used for attacks, but Peter has no cards in hand, so why not? That Bloodchief Ascension now has 3 counters on it, so it's finally live. So every card that goes to Peter's graveyard now, Matthew will drain him 2 life for it. And some more main phase Sensei's Divining Top, trying to draw on something. Peter finds a Morph and plays that. That's a go for the throat for the Morph. Yeah, Riptide Enchancer would have made things interesting. Could have stolen Gwendlyn. But That's going to trigger the Bloodchief Ascension, and then Gwendlyn and the Beast token swing in. So it looks like that's how Matthew's going to win, just silly little incremental damage like that, rather than a big memory jar type effect triggering the Bloodchief Ascension. And Peter's just desperately trying to find something with his Sensei's Divining Top. Another face down creature. And Matthew has the end of turn terminate, triggering the Bloodchief Ascension again and clearing the way for attacks. Not a really interesting game for showcasing how the Gwendlyn deck is supposed to work. Just isn't really drawing the right cards. There's the Megrim. Yeah, it's got all the Punisher effects out, but it doesn't have the effects to make them work. So usually this deck can kill pretty decisively rather than a slow and painful death like this. And it doesn't really have that many control elements. Gwendlyn sort of drew all of its removal spells this game. Peter drops Ixodor Reality Sculptor. He's pretty good in a morph theme deck, I guess. But mostly he's just coming out to block some of these 3-powered creatures. So Matthew finally draws into something. Wheel and Deal. Fortunately that doesn't trigger any of the Punisher effects, because they're all related to discard. But at least it forces Peter to get some cards in hand so that Matthew can activate Gwendlyn. May seem like a bad idea to just give Peter 7 free cards like that, but with Megrim, Bloodchief Ascension, and Guest Grimoire out, Peter doesn't want to have cards in hand. And there's a Overkill Liliana's Caress. Basically, if Peter discards a card, he takes 6, and he's at 2 life right now. So he's pretty much dead. Oh, except he flips over a Brine Elemental, which forces Matthew to skip his untap step. So Gwendlyn won't be tapping for the kill, and with Ixodor's ability to put creatures face down again, that's actually a hard lock. So Peter might have actually drawn into a solution to this complete death trap. But like I said, Matthew did draw all of his removal of this game, so that's Ashes to Ashes to break up that desperation combo there. Ashes to Ashes is really good. Although it's pretty hilarious there because it's the only black removal spell that exiles creatures rather than putting them in the graveyard. So it actually doesn't trigger the Bloodchief Ascension, which would have ended the game. Any other removal spell, I guess, would have won, but I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. More morphs. Morph was my favorite mechanic. I played during Onslaught Limited when literally any creature that had morph was a playable pick because it was a 2/2 for 3. So you would look down a table of games and see a couple dozen face down creatures. Made things exciting. I wanted to build some sort of morph themed deck in EDH for a while, but the right general didn't really come along. Ixodor is only one color, so yeah, it's not really that fun. But Animar actually combos really well with morphs, so when he came along, it just seemed like the right deck. Cephalid Coliseum is a cool little land. It works really well in both these decks, actually. Animar uses it to restock its hand, and Gwendlyn uses it to target other players and force them to take lots of damage. That's an exotic orchard for Peter to give him the red mana he needs. Like I said, pretty budget mana bases. It's a tectonic edge there. So, Animar comes out, and he's going to get the Arcane Denial. I think Gwendlyn's only running like 3 or 4 counter spells, but if he has one when Animar is cast, then countering is the right play, for sure. Diabolic Tutor. Yeah, there's a Mosswar Bridge. Not so great in this deck, since Peter has so many dinky little morph creatures. But he does have some fatties. But it definitely has no trouble getting to 10 power in this deck. Explosive Vegetation. Green Ramp is so good. So, this is what Matthew tutored for, Liliana's Caress, since that is the main win condition for the deck, and he has Wheel of Fortune. So, players are both going to refresh their hands. Peter's going to take 12 off of the Liliana's Caress. And if Matthew can draw into another wheel effect right away, then the deck can really start to get going. This is how it can kill really quickly. But it is reliant on those tutors to grab the few really good win pieces. Peter recasts Animar. He's just really important to the success of this deck, because otherwise it's just a bunch of really crappy, inefficient morph creatures. And most of them really are crappy. Although all of the creatures in this deck have some sort of utility, but a lot of the time it's not really worth flipping them over. But it is fun when you decide to do it. Unfortunately, the best card Matthew has after the wheel is Wound Reflection, which doesn't do much on its own. It just means that when he finally does draw into maybe a Windfall or a Dragon Mage or one of the many other wheel-like effects, he's gonna do a lot of damage with Liliana's Caress. So Peter's in danger just with those 2 black enchantments out, but he does have Animar out, which is always a big bonus. Primordial Sage. Like I said, this deck runs on a lot of crazy draw engines, because those are the kind of things that lets you play off a bunch of morph creatures in one turn. Earlier you saw Future Sight, you saw Memory Jar. Peter also has his own Wheel of Fortune. Recycle is in this deck. Like, those are the kinds of draw engines that really work well with Animar. And you can see the Primordial Sage doing its job. Every time Peter plays a free morph creature, he gets to draw another card, and with the high density of morph creatures in this deck, there's a good chance he'll just draw into another one. So you can see that getting out of hand pretty quickly. And Animar is up to 8/8. And suddenly Peter has lethal damage on the board there. You can see how quickly this Animar deck can get out of hand. And still Matthew can just win with one good draw here. Something like Windfall would just do a ton of damage, especially after Peter drew all those cards off Primordial Sage. Go for the throat on the Sage. Too little, too late. Now Peter has a bunch of morph creatures and a Gaia's Cradle to pay for their flip-up costs if he wants to. Really all he needs to do is protect Animar, and he'll go all the way. Yeah, Peter's gonna flip up two of the really big ones. Now he's definitely got lethal damage on the board, so Matthew does have a stall for 1 turn. Cryptic Command to tap down the team. Peter's gonna flip up a, if you can find it. Keeping track of all your face-down creatures is hard. Willbender to redirect the bounce of Cryptic Command, which was targeting Animar. Instead it's going to bounce Wound Reflection. But that gives Matthew 1 turn to draw into something. And he does have outs at this point. Oblivion Stone or something would be a good draw. But a Swamp is not a good draw. So yeah, looks like Matthew's toast. Didn't really get to see the Gwendlyn deck do what it's supposed to do. Oh look, a 1-1 was under the Mosswort Bridge. But like I said, it's more of a multiplayer deck. The Animar deck definitely got to showcase some of its ridiculous capabilities. Animar is just a pretty busted general, no matter how you build him, but this is just one way you can do it. You could also do it with creating artifact creatures if you wanted to. Anyways, that's the video. Thanks for watching.